With its seemingly long list of benefits, which includes boosting mood, alleviating pain, promoting healthy sleep and healthy digestion, improving skin conditions, and so many more, it's no wonder people are turning to essential oils to support their health and well-being. The popularity of these wonder-working oils is stirring interest in learning how to extract them for personal use or for business. Welcome to Extraction Essentials, where you'll learn and discover how to create a formula using quality engineered products. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, this podcast is all about the process of extraction tools and the equipment that surrounds the extraction lab or facility. Create an income while enjoying the many benefits and uses of essential oils by tuning in to Extraction Essentials.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Extraction Essentials. I'm your host, Tony Frischknecht, and today we're going to be talking about the basics of extracting essential oils. And I'm excited to have my guest on here today with me, Nick Gay. He's head of product management for Essential Extractions. Nick, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm so glad you had time to join us. So, simplicity. Let's make this. I want to make this so people can walk through if they choose they want to do some kind of extraction. They have, the basics to start off with and some common knowledge, depending on who they're talking to online or who they're connecting with in the outside world to learn how to extract their own essential oils. So what I want to start with you on is steam distillation. Seems like it's an old process. How do you know how far back it goes or how common it is used today?
It's definitely the most common form of extraction used today, and I don't know the exact date, but it's very ancient technology. It's been used for years and years and years.
Okay, what kind of different botanicals can be extracted through steam distillation?
Yeah, so most essential oils that you'll buy at the store are extracted through steam distillation. The only things that are not are things that are heat sensitive, such as citrus fruits or certain flowers and things like that.
Is this a small scale operation, large scale? Can you walk me through that? Like how you've seen it or how it can be done? Can it be done on both scales?
Totally. Yeah, it could be done anywhere from right here in my kitchen, very small scale, anywhere up to where you're loading in the botanicals with a crane.
Okay.
So yeah, very wide range there.
I can just imagine this crane going in and dropping. I mean, that's a huge commercial scale that just is far, far out there for my mind to comprehend right now. So I bet you that's a pretty impressive operation when you see that.
Totally.
So what kind of yields are we seeing in the steam distillation? And I know, I'm sure it varies on the botanical you're using, but what type of percentages do you generally see?
So yeah, typically steam distillation, you'll yield a little bit higher than most other forms of extraction for essential oil. And for example, like for lavender, depending on the variant, you'll get anywhere from like 2 to 3%.
Can you walk me and the audience through right now a simple steam distillation setup and just explain that as best you can so that we can get a good picture of it?
Totally. So typically it's either going to be in the form of a glassware apparatus setup or a kettle that you set on your stove. The easiest is the kettle that you set on your stove, which you'll just fill the bottom of it with water. And then there's a little basket that you set the botanicals in, and then a lid. And then there's the condenser that you hook up to chilled water. And so, yeah, you just turn it on, it boils, and then the steam rises through the botanicals, takes the aromatics with it, and then it's condensed in the condenser back into a liquid where it's then separated in a separatory funnel into oil and water.
So as that steam comes up, is it in kind of a closed containment area where this is going through the entire process? Or is it, when you say basket, I think of basket like like a wicker basket, right? That's what I'm thinking. Is it a metal basket usually, or how is it set in there?
Yeah, it's a stainless steel basket, and the entire thing's enclosed.
Okay.
It's under slight positive pressure. Nothing crazy, a couple PSI maybe. But yeah, so the basket sits in there kind of like like a tea steeper almost.
Okay, gotcha.
And then the steam rises, and then the pressure helps it move over to the condenser, and that's where you collect your essential oils.
So at the end where you collect it, how pure is that essential oil there through the steam distillation? Is it extremely high level, or is it, because I don't know how accurate steam is at this point.
Yeah, so I mean, it produces a good product for sure, but there's other forms of extraction that can produce much more potent essential oils.
Okay, great. And what kind of expense can you expect to say, myself, if I wanted to do some steam distillation extraction? Can you walk me through like what kind of expense I would be looking at to try to create a steam distillation?
Totally. So it'd be about, on the lowest end, about $300. But that setup, you could only run about a little under an ounce at a time.
Okay.
So, you're not getting too much from that. But it could go all the way up to thousands, even for, home use.
And if you're, depending on what dry botanical you're using, it could be pretty expensive purchasing the biomass, correct?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because you need a lot. So like, for example, with lavender, if you had 100 grams of lavender, you're only getting about 2 to 3 grams of essential oil back from that. So, even if you have a couple lavender plants at your house, that's really only going to yield a couple grams of essential oil.
Yeah. So what can you do with a couple grams? I mean, can you give us some ideas on what you can use that product?
Totally.
For?
Yeah, you could make like a lotion or something like that. Like typically, like when I make lotions at home, I'll use about 1 gram per like 4-ounce container.
Okay, so it does go a long ways then.
Yeah, I mean, essential oils are super super potent, and I mean, you could see why they're so expensive as well, because you just get so little from so much. But with that said, you don't need a little bit goes a long way for sure.
Yeah, I mean, anybody out there that's ever gone down the spice and herb aisle, that tells you how expensive the things can get. Because when you're looking at a little jar of herbs and it's like $7, you're like, oh, that's what, a couple ounces, maybe 4 ounces. So if you try to get a large amount of flour, it can get pretty expensive depending on what type of herb you're using. So just to recap on the steam distillation. So water is boiled and creates steam. Steam passes through the botanicals, brings aromatics with it. Steam is cooled and then condensed into a liquid. Oil and the water are separated, and that's where you get your essential oils. Am I correct? Yep. Okay, totally. Awesome. All right, well, let's go on to the next one. Now, we're going to go into a little more, I would say this process creates a more purity, like Nick was talking about before, but I want to talk about CO2 extraction. Do you know what this is used a lot in right now in our world, what we're extracting?
Yeah, totally. So CO2 extraction is gaining like a lot of headway in the cannabis and hemp industry, but it's also been used for not super long, but a while to decaffeinate coffee, and then also make certain essential oils like citrus essential oils and rose hip essential oil and things like that.
Okay. What are the big positives of using CO2 for botanicals?
Totally. So the biggest advantage is that you're not using heat. So a lot of things that are heat sensitive and like rose hip oil or citrus oils can be produced with CO2 extraction a lot better than steam distillation, where those aromatics would be destroyed through the process.
Now, is your purity yet better? Is the potency better? What do you mean by a lot better that it creates?
Yeah, the purity is a lot higher. I was actually reading an article the other day that said that CO2 essential oil has 12 times more different compounds in it than steam distilled essential oil.
Interesting. Okay. So creates more potency. Is the solvent, is CO2 a harsh chemical?
No, I mean, I'm exhaling it right now. It's in our bodies, and the cool thing about it is even after you extract it, even if you had liquid CO2 sitting right now, it would be gone within, a minute or so.
It just evaporate?
Yeah, because it wants to be a gas. So when we're doing this extraction process, we're kind of making it do something it doesn't really want to do, be a liquid. And so once it gets back to atmosphere, it just wants to get right back out and be a gas. So
it seems like what you're talking about is you're manipulating temperatures to create this perfect situation.
Totally. Yeah, you're manipulating temperatures and pressures in order to get CO2 into a liquid form.
Okay, so walk us through how CO2 would be extracted on, we'll just say a small scale at this point.
Yeah, so I'm going to walk you through the process of extracting using CO2. So you can use a machine just like the one we offer at Essential Extraction. So what you do is you load your botanicals in the process chamber, and then you would add CO2 into the system, which it would then go through the chiller, which condenses it into a liquid. And then that liquid is then forced through the botanicals and then taken over to the collection vessel where the CO2 is then boiled off and recirculated through the system.
Okay, great. So when you walk us through that, I'll just have you show us so people can see that are watching on YouTube so they can see how it runs around, but also have you explain it again so we can really see how that breaks down. So what do you have to do to the botanicals prior to putting it in the collection vessel as you were talking about?
Yeah, the only thing that needs to be done is if it's like something that's very dense, it needs to be ground. And then always dry your product before putting it in there because you'll get water in the system and it's just a whole mess.
That's a very good, I've been around extraction for a while, but I didn't even think about that. You probably learned that after the first time. You're like, you go in, you're like, I really like this extraction thing. I'm just thinking of, person never extracted before. Please dry your herb first.
Totally. Yeah.
Because what kind of issues will that cause in your machine if you don't dry it prior?
Well, typically the product that you're going to get isn't quite as good. Because you're going to be bringing like chlorophyll and green, dark, nasty stuff with it. And then also like on a safety level, having water in your system is a kind of a health hazard because mold and mildew and things like that can be produced. So that's like the major thing there.
That's a very good point because you don't want this passing into the future extractions that you do. And if you've got that mold in there, you're just going to pick that up each time you go around, right?
Totally.
Okay. All right. Well, now let's go to the extraction, the CO2 extraction machine we were going to discuss. We just discussed a minute ago. Guys, I want to let you know too, is I am going to upload everything we're talking about here. So if you want a frame of reference to really follow us, it's going to be in the show notes here. My team is going to put that in there so you'll be able to click on it. So just wanted to give you that. So Nick, let's take a look at the little buddy extractor so we can show the people what small scale CO2 looks like.
Awesome. Yeah, totally. So yeah, the two systems shown have the exact same capacity.
So Nick is bringing up his screen right now. So Nick, show me what we're looking at. Describe what we're looking at here.
Totally. Yeah. So the two systems I have shown here have the exact same biomass capacity. The one on the left is a steam distillation apparatus available from the Science Company, which is a local place here in Denver. And the one on the right is our tabletop CO2 extractor offered by Essential Extraction. And so I'll just go through walk you through the whole process of each of these. So on the left here, so right here, that's where your boiling water is going to go.
Okay, I see. So he's just making, for the listeners out there, he's walking through a tutorial of this picture, and he's actually drawing on it so we know how the process and how the flow of the steam goes through. So go ahead, Nick.
Totally, yeah. So here's where your boiling water is here. It's producing steam. Your steam then travels up here where your biomass is here. All your botanicals and herbs are right here. Your steam then travels through there, up through this arm, this is the condenser here. There's cold water flowing through here and then out here. So this then chills that back into a liquid, which goes down into this little collection thing here, which is then goes into a separatory funnel to separate out the oil and the water. And then so on the right here is the CO2 extraction machine. And so not shown over here would be your CO2 tank. That's your CO2 tank here. And
so is there a line that runs in to connect that? How is it connected to the machine itself?
Yes, correct. Yeah, there's a line similar to, it's like the same type of tank that you'd use for like a keg or something like that. So it's a similar connection.
Okay.
Yeah, so what you'll do is you turn on, open the valve of the CO2 tank, which then allows CO2 to flow through that line. And then you open this valve here, which behind right here, not shown, there's a chiller. And so the CO2 goes into this chiller here, gets condensed into a liquid. And then that...
So in the tank, it's gas.
Yeah, in the tank,
we're converting it to a liquid at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
And then so that liquid CO2 then travels this way down, and then you open this valve here, and that allows the liquid CO2 to travel into this process column here, which is where your botanicals are.
What's happening in the sight valve right here, Nick? So I see where the chiller, after it's running after the chiller, and then it's running down into the sight valve where you can see it drip in.
Exactly. Yeah. So
what's it doing right there?
Right there, you can actually see, right here, you could see the CO2 collecting when that valve is closed. So you'll see how much liquid CO2 you have. And then you'll open this valve, which will allow the liquid CO2 to flow into your process vessel where your botanicals are.
So why do you need to open and close that valve right there? What's the purpose of that?
Basically, you're allowing the CO2 to condense into a liquid in the chiller, and it takes time to do that. Okay. So you kind of have to throttle it a little bit in order to get enough CO2 into the system.
So when you open it up, is that sight valve there, that sight area, is that full or is it halfway full? How do you know when to open it up?
So you let that fill up to the top, and then you'll dump it through, and you'll actually see the liquid CO2 dropping through that sight glass.
So once it drops through that sight glass, now we're going into where the biomass is kept from the whatever herb or botanical we have in there, correct?
Exactly. And that's right there where I just drew that arrow. And then so after that.
So now does it drip? Does that CO2 drip through the collect the vessel there, or how does that work?
Well, it's actually pushed through with the pressure because the system's pressurized. The liquid is pushed through the botanical material.
Okay. So from there, what's next?
So yeah, from there, the liquid CO2 and your aromatics and whatnot, they travel over here to this collection vessel here.
Okay.
Which then a small amount of heat is applied, which makes this liquid CO2 boil and turn back into a gas, which and your botanicals, your aromatics and stuff are a lot heavier than the CO2. So they sit down here at the bottom.
In the collector itself.
In the collector itself. And then that CO2 is boiled off. It goes back up here, back into the chiller, where it's then recirculated through the system.
So it just keeps doing that, getting in. So then do you have to, okay. So closed loop system, it keeps running through there. So let me ask you a question. Sure. So in that site, where that site is, do you have to keep closing and opening that valve as it fills up, or no?
Once you have enough CO2 in the system, then you're just running for your optimum amount of time that you're trying to go for. Typically, like for lavender, for example, I'll do about a 4-hour extraction time.
Okay. So,
so once you get enough in CO2 in the system, you just kind of leave it. So typically it'll take me about like 5-10 minutes to get the system started, and then I'll just let it be for 4 hours, and then you go in and you can harvest your material out of this spout right here.
Okay. So that just opens up that spout, and then I assume you want to have the system off when you open that valve.
Yeah. So what you'll do is you'll close this valve, you'll close that valve, and then you'll.
I'm sorry, guys. The guys that are listening, I know this is challenging to follow. That's why we're gonna post this so you can grab it. But I urge you to go check it out on the YouTube channel if you're really interested to see the whole flow part of this. And we have, for people who are like, oh, it sounds way too complicated. There is step-by-step instructions as you use our system that will show you how to do this. I just want to let you guys know that it's not that complicated when you look at the picture here. So Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, so you'll just open that valve there, and then the pressure will allow the essential oils and whatnot to come out of this little spout here. Yeah, you're rocking.
Okay, so you're running it for 4 hours, and I know your yields are going to vary on this as well, depending on what botanical you have.
Totally.
To go back what we were talking about earlier, and purities and actually yield from this, what is the quality of the product once we get to this stage here, where the collector's at, where the collector's at?
Yeah, so it's a much more potent product that's produced with the CO2 extraction. And so what I mean by that is CO2 extracted essential oils typically have a mixture of essential oils and absolutes. So it's kind of the best of all worlds. So
what's an absolute? Yeah,
totally. Yeah, absolutes are extracted using typically harsh solvents like hexane and heptane and ethanol. But it's another old form of extraction that's typically not used too much today, just because of the harsh chemicals used in the process. But it does produce a very, very, very potent product that typically a lot of perfume companies will use that because you need very, very little. But unlike essential oil, it's actually typically like a solid. So it's like almost a gummy kind of sticky material as opposed to a liquid.
Okay. So we've got a lot of information here. I'm really liking what I'm seeing. Let's talk about, the verse CO2 extraction versus steam distillation, and what are our positives and our negatives?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, a lot of the positives of the steam distillation is it's relatively simple. So you don't need too much training. The startup cost is typically a little bit lower. But some of the downsides to it are that when you're doing this process, it smells awful. I don't know if you've ever
I've never done that before. No, I haven't seen any before.
Like if you overcook broccoli, that's kind of what it smells like.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
So it's kind of a noxious smell, whereas with the CO2 extraction machine, it's all in a closed loop and there's no odor and anything like that. And then the other problem about a steam distillation is it takes a lot of power. So like on a small scale, you're just boiling a little bit of water. But you can imagine on a large scale where you have a giant vessel that you need to boil all this water, it takes a lot of power to produce all that heat.
Okay. CO2 isn't a harsh solvent. We talked about that earlier. So the chemical effect, it's not going to leave anything in the botanical itself or in the oil itself. There won't be any byproduct of CO2 that's left there that's dangerous?
No, not at all.
Okay. So what if somebody was to tell you, say, well, I don't mind the smell. I'm just going to do it this way because it's cheaper and this is the old way I like doing it this way. What would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that you can't make everything out with steam distillation. So if you wanted, rose essential oil or citrus oils, really, even if you're extracting lavender, if you did one that was steam distilled and compared that to CO2 extracted lavender and you smell them side by side, it'll be night and day, the difference.
It's a noticeable difference, huh?
Totally.
Okay.
But with that said, sometimes depending on what you're doing, you might like the steam distilled essential oil better because it's like kind of earthier or more floral, whereas the CO2 essential oil might be sweeter or something like that. So it's all really about what you are trying to get out of it. But like if you're trying to get medicinal benefits and things like that, then CO2 extraction is the way to go because, you know, when you're not killing off a lot of things during that heat process. And so you're able to retain a lot of different compounds that you would typically lose out on.
From the heat, you actually,
yes.
Okay. So, you know, you walked us through a lot of how the Little Buddy system works and also the steam distillation. What kind of knowledge is required to run the Little Buddy machine extractor?
I mean, honestly, not too much. Really, you could read through the instructions. It's about like a 10-page little booklet, tells you everything you need to know. And honestly, after a few times running it, you'll be really comfortable, and it's pretty easy to use. Honestly, like once you get that thing started, it runs itself. So, okay. and I know, like, you know, me talking about it, drawing all the arrows and X's and O's and such, it makes it look all confusing. But when you're actually running the machine, it's very simple.
So what we're saying, guys, is, you know, there are machines out there. There's not a lot that are running small extraction, the one that we're showing here. You know, what our goal to get out of this day is really so you guys understand the simple basics of extraction. We talk about the CR2 because it is our machine and we really believe in it. However, there are other ways to do this. So if you guys find something that you really like and you want to go after it, you're more than free to. We have an option here that I think stands out compared to a lot of other companies. And a lot of it is because we've put a lot of thought into it. We've also had a lot of experience in this extraction world. And so we've tried to solve a lot of these issues that we've experienced in the last 10 years. So when it comes down to choosing what type of extraction you're going to use, there's a lot of different ways out there. Now, Nick, what other types of extraction are there that we didn't even cover today?
Ethanol, hydrocarbon, and hydrocarbon would cover butane and propane and things like that. And then there's also solventless extraction, which uses cold water or pressure and heat. So there's a lot of different ways of extraction, and like I mean, you know, not commonly used, but there's even people who extract products using like nitrous oxide and you know, so there's all sorts of different types of extraction out there. So
now I think there's a lot of misconception on how safe CO2 extraction is out there. Why is that?
Well, I feel like CO2 is a solvent, but so is water.
Okay.
So, I mean, really, sometimes people will see something like that and be like, "Oh, it's made with chemicals and et cetera, et cetera." But it's like I said. I mean, I'm breathing CO2 out right now. I mean, most of my extraction experience in the cannabis industry, I've worked with butane and propane, which, you know, it produces a good extract. It produces a strong quality extract, but it's also really hard to get all of that residual butane or propane out of the product. So, you know, with CO2, there's nothing left in it other than what you're trying to get out of it, the essential oil or the botanical oil that you're trying to extract.
And it seems like if there was anything left in it, it would just evaporate. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if you've ever played with like dry ice or anything like that, but like if you let dry ice sit out overnight, I mean, it's gone, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you know, CO2, it doesn't want to be solid, doesn't want to be liquid. And that's why it goes back to its gaseous state. And that's why it's so easy to get out of the product, and you don't need any post-processing steps.
So just to reiterate what we just went over, CO2 extraction can be used for heat-sensitive materials, creates a more potent product, shorter runtime than steam distillation, no harsh solvents or chemicals used, even though it is a solvent, Typically, it's a higher initial cost. However, you're getting those positives of the potency and yields from that. And it requires a little bit of knowledge, but not a lot. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And with steam distillation, there's no solvents or chemicals used besides steam, which water is, you said a minute ago, is a solvent. It's lower initial costs. Doesn't take a lot of training to run one of those either. However, the smell is pretty bad when you're trying, especially if you're running it. Let's say you were making this in your house, it would probably stink up your entire house.
Totally. Yeah.
Can be used for heat sensitive materials, long extraction times. What kind of times was it, just so we can
It's typically about 8 hours or longer. Okay. So yeah, quite a while to have some funk boiling in your kitchen.
Yeah, no doubt. I know, if anybody's ever cooked something or burnt something and it just stays in your house for a day or two, it's brutal. And
burnt popcorn.
Yeah, yeah, burnt popcorn. And I can imagine it really starts stinking when you get those botanicals in the room. So, well, this is all great information. Now, we covered a lot here. So I want to, I always try to extend the invitation for people to reach out. Nick, if people are looking, we're going to post this in the show as well, but if people are looking to have some questions about extraction, how can they reach out to you? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, totally. You can get me on my email, which I'll have Tony post in the notes section, but it's also nick@essentialextractioncorp.com. But yeah, you can just send me an email and we'll chit chat and tell me what you got and we'll figure it out.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to share this stuff with us, because it seems very complicated when you first start looking at extraction. I know when you go into an extraction lab, you're like, wow, what is all this stuff? So thanks for creating some clarity on the basics and how to start. Guys, I want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. I know you guys could be listening to so many other podcasts, but we are really trying to bring you firsthand knowledge on how guys like Nick have been doing extracting for a long time and the new stuff we're coming out with. So if you have any questions about what we just discussed or the little buddy, please check us out at extractionessentials.com. You can reach any one of us there. We'll get your email. We'll make sure to get back to you with any questions you have. You can also, on the site too, will be stuff about the little buddy. So if you're interested in looking more into that and kind of understanding how that works, pricing, we also have leasing options too, because we know that there are people out there that don't have a big budget. So there's a lot of options if you're looking at this. And what we plan to bring you here in the future, I can't wait for you to see, but we're going to be bringing you some business ideas to help you create. If you're looking to create your own formulations to create a product, that's what we're going to show you how to do there. And I know Nick is going to be on with me, so he's going to show you a lot of this too. And again, if you guys like what you're hearing, please subscribe. We want to be in the top 100 podcasts here over the next year, so we could really use your help to do that. And that is going to create more great content if you like what you're hearing today. So hit the subscribe button on your podcast or through YouTube as you see it come up there, okay? And these notes will be in the show. You guys can grab them here, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening.
You have just listened to another informative episode of Extraction Essentials with Tony Frischknecht. We invite you to come back next time as we strive to provide useful knowledge and tools every week to help you on your extraction business. You can also visit extractionessentials.com for additional resources and to know more about working with Tony. See you again next time.